You know, I do teach about forgiveness, but it's a much simpler quality than that. That this whole, for me, the whole area, it's some combination of relax, get over yourself, relax. You're gonna die, so relax. No, I'm really serious. We make this stuff so difficult. You know, we make like normal human things seem so complicated and so esoteric and convoluted. And you know, if you look just in any way mildly objectively at life, you'll see that people hurt each other and that you hurt other people. So what are you going to do about that? I mean, some of the extra stuff we put around all this is what makes it such an interesting thing for me. Like all the drama that we lay over the simple reality that most of us are unimaginably selfishly absorbed. Because of that, we hurt other people and magnify the things done to us way out of proportion. So that's it. You know, like we're so narcissistically absorbed that we think that the world begins and ends with us, that the rest of the world literally barely matters, and that, you know, some of us can keep grudges going for 50 years. No, it's right before I got in here, I'm flying to New York after this, just teaching at Omega, and I teach with, this stuff is remarkable, not my piece of it, but I teach with a surgeon who is showing people that you don't really need spinal surgery except in the most extreme conditions. And that he has, I don't know how many patients, 100 or 200 patients that he has helped in part with forgiveness. That, you know, you don't have to have all this rage and stuff, but he just sent me an email from a psychologist who was saying to him, and he passed it on to me because he didn't know the answer. He said, okay, I get it. You're supposed to forgive the past. This is what the psychologist was saying. But I have all these adult patients whose parents are still irritating the hell out of them. And first of all, how do you take that even seriously? Like, you're an adult. If you don't want your parent to irritate you, don't communicate with them. Just do whatever you want. You're 45 years old. But so he says to me, my patients are always saying, I can get over the past, which I don't believe. I don't believe at all, because if you can get over the past, then you know how to get over stuff so you can deal with the present. But at least they like to convince themselves that they're more noble than they actually are. I can get over the past, but it's the present stuff where they haven't changed and they're still like violating my boundaries and blah, 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 blah. And they're still the same rotten human being they've been since I've been 6. That's not the sign of somebody who's gotten over the past, right? At all. But so the therapist was asking, what do I say to them? And I said, well, the only thing I wrote back, because I get this question too often, I said, well, tell your clients that they're asking the wrong question, or the wrong couple of questions. Like one, like, why am I still expecting old people to be different than they are? Like, haven't I learned anything? And 2, why haven't I not in my adult life learned to take responsibility for how I feel? Like, it's nothing to do with your parents anymore. Like, you know, you. Like, asking the wrong questions. And I was thinking, like, why isn't that a more common question? Like, what are we all doing blaming everybody? And I understand some of it, but I don't understand all of it. I don't understand fully the human tendency to not want to own our own bad behavior. Like that I don't fully understand. That somebody who's upset with their mother for 40 years, irregardless of what their mother did, has a problem. Their mother, it doesn't matter what the mother did. If you stay upset with somebody for 40 years, you haven't checked life out at all. Like you've been living in a bunker, with no information coming in, barely air. And what are you doing? Like 40 years later, still thinking your childhood matters? Like, are you kidding me? Like right now, there's I don't remember what the exact number is, but you know these horrible stories that 35,000 children starve to death every day under the age of 8. And you're still worried about what happened when you were 8? Go feed somebody. Go do something useful. But the very fact that you're still thinking of your childhood now as if it matters is shocking to me. Not shocking, because we all do that, but just are you kidding? That's a relevant question? And so that's what I mean by people are in a bunker. It's an airtight way of having the world not really exist outside of your own head. Because there's suffering everywhere you look. So why are we so obsessed with ours? Especially old stuff. I mean, new stuff, yeah, it makes sense. But old stuff? I know people who are still mad at dead people. See, that's the one that gives me real humor. You're mad at dead people. Sometimes a lot of dead people. I can't believe they did that, but they're dead. But this is our mind. This is the mind that we are saddled with. A mind that makes enormous difficulty for us and causes us so much pain because we don't see life clearly at all. We don't check it out. And the things that I have seen, again, I've been running the Stanford Forgiveness Project now almost 20 years. And I've met a good number of people who have experienced real horror that I don't even know I don't even have words for. It's I don't know how anybody copes with some of this stuff. But 95% of the stuff I've seen is just everyday stuff. My husband lied to me, my kids lied to me, I lied to me. They don't love me anymore, I don't love them anymore. They were mean, nasty, unconscious, insensitive, just everyday stuff. And if you look around, it's happening everywhere, all over the place. So what is that quality that has us obsess about the everyday stuff that happened to us and regurgitated endlessly awash in a world of real current suffering? How do we defend that to ourselves? How do we defend the capacity of our mind to literally hold on to memories of things that happened to us in this short life where we could actually be useful, to help? So there's this enormous disconnect of attention and empathy. That's normative. It's and having worked in some really awful situations, so we've done a small amount of work in the Catholic and Protestant thing in Northern Ireland, and we've done some work post Civil War in Sierra Leone, and places where it's unimaginably horrific. And part of that is because human beings hold on to their own stuff. Sometimes for generations and generations and generations. Like, your side killed my like my great-grandfather's like third cousin. Your side did that. So I'm not letting go of that family hatred or tribal hatred to your side. So we have the capacity, we don't recognize how cruel that is to hold on to it. What an act of violence that is, that we're seeding the world with violence, of hatred and contempt and all this other stuff by holding on. It's like what is unseen is how much it takes two to make a problem. You know, one person to give offense, but you fully require the other to take offense. And if the other person is healed enough and there's no offense taken, then you don't have the same problem. But we're not taught that it takes two to have a problem, of the offender and the offendee who's so identified with the role of offendee. You know, hi, I'm Fred, I had a lousy mother. You know what I mean? It's like, what does that mean? But it gives me a way, when I say, hi, I'm Fred, I had a lousy mother, it gives me a way to then pay the world back for not loving me enough. It gives me an excuse, it gives me a mental schema, and it gives me a way to defend my own insensitivity. Well, of course I'm not nice to you. I wasn't loved as a kid. Well, we all do this. Every one of us does this in our intimate relationships. Well, what are you expecting of me, to be an adult? What are you, crazy? We all do this. Don't expect me to be an adult. But the pain of like not releasing the identity of victimhood, it doesn't mean you forget what happened, but there's a very specific kind of identity that I'm a victim. I've been harmed by something like outside of me. And therefore I don't have to be fully responsible for how I live my adult life. Which is it's a very delicate thing. I remember, and there was some very interesting experience I had as these ideas were forming in me. I remember once I was doing a couples therapy session, maybe 20 years ago. And I remember like couple A, person A, not couple A, but like, I have no idea what gender this person was, but they were female. And the husband said something obnoxious to the woman. And I remember the woman turning to him with contempt and said, "How dare you talk to me like that? You know that's the way my father used to talk to me, and I told you never do that." And she was angry. And I'm sitting there as the therapist thinking, wait, there's something so wrong with this picture, so wrong. I couldn't articulate what was so wrong with it. And it took me a little while to realize that what's so wrong with it is that she needed to be apologizing to him. "I'm sorry. I'm triggered by my past. It's not you. It's me. You're not my father. In fact, my father's not even my father anymore. I'm 35 years old. It's all me. And I'm really sorry that I brought my crap to this marriage." And I remember thinking, I'm in a very strange field that doesn't make that abundantly clear. Like, wait a second, honey. How old are you? And who's sitting in front of you? And whatever you tell yourself, that's fine. But this is not your dad. He never was your dad. And your dad isn't the same person anymore. So accept that you're damaged and own it and apologize for it. And then make haste to try to heal yourself. But I'm watching this and I'm thinking, wow, this is so bizarre. Like, I never got any education in like anything around this kind of, wait a second, this woman is, the only thing I'm seeing is her unkindness. He didn't try to hurt her, but she has attack, because her role as a victim was so identified in her. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with her reacting with pain, because that's what's triggered and that's what her imprinting is. That I get. It's the schema and the language that she uses in herself that gives her permission to be harsh to him. We all do that to some degree. We're all guilty of that. I'm not whole. And anything that reminds me of how I'm not whole needs to be stopped and criticized. So, but that's what my profession has taught us in some degree, psychology. Be very, very careful with, and I don't even like the word victim. I mean, I happen, to subscribe to some sense that the world is a reasonably orderly place and things happen as they should. But I don't know that. I can't know that. But the idea that some things that have happened to us in life are not as they're supposed to be, are somehow out of tune because they're painful to us, that I don't believe. Because if you look at life, it's regularly painful. Simply, what I've said to so many people, even if you have the most perfect life, I've said it in classes, one day you'll just wake up dead. You know what I mean? You don't get away. Even if everything goes right, every single person you ever loved will die. So, don't be so, angry at the things that remind you of your vulnerability, even of your helplessness. Because that's what we're all fighting against when we don't want to forgive. We're scared to death of recognizing how absolutely vulnerable we are at all moments. That this skin is permeable, this heart will stop beating, that we can't protect those we love, and at any moment, anything can happen. And so pain and unpleasantness and unkindness reminds us of how vulnerable we are. And I believe it's that we are resisting at all costs. That there is no way to fully armor up and protect ourselves. And so what we do is we get mad or blame or get pissy at the things that remind us of our vulnerability. What's so terrible? I mean, look, I'm not advocating for unkindness or cruelty. But what is so terrible about remembering that happened to you? It can be a sign of so many things besides and including the damage it does to our neurobiology as we are growing up. Parental cruelty is not good for the brain. There's no advocacy of that. But at any moment you can remember, yes, I have been harmed. Well, that puts me in good company, say 7 billion people. Right? That kind of gives me entree into a very select group. And let me look at the paper this morning or watch the news and see how many people just today are being grievously harmed in this world. Just to touch us. That's an alternative to victimhood. Do we use some of these things that happen to us to open our heart or to close it? I mean, that's the question. Do we open our heart? And one of the ways we open our hearts is by accepting our vulnerability, by accepting at a very deep level how lucky we are that more bad stuff doesn't happen. And with that vulnerability, to be capable of touching the part of us that shares that with everybody. We're all vulnerable. We're all watching someone die, or this is the mix. And so to be so angry and self-absorbed, to unforgive to not forgive one teeny piece of this, just one teensy slice of what life is, I think misses the mark. I mean, it's not terrible, it just misses the mark. Because it's based on a kind of faulty foundation. The other simple thing that I saw and we saw is unforgiveness rests usually on a platform of a lack of gratitude. That's been probably the strongest association that I've seen. That someone who objectively looks at their life in terms of what they have gotten that they haven't deserved versus what they have gotten bad that they haven't deserved, what they've gotten good so outweighs what they've gotten bad that it's not even close, like food every day. I mean, at some level, what did any of us do to be fed when we, or to have a sun shine us or anything? But we so highlight the things that we don't think we deserved in the negative way and basically ignore all the things that we can't quite deserve in the positive way. Strongest among that, the human mind appears to be wired to struggle for gratitude and positiveness. It appears to be wired that way. It appears to be wired in a way that we are threat-centric. That just appears to be the way it is, that our brains are oriented so exquisitely to what's a threat to us, and very, very, very roughly to what's good. Which is how, when people are asked, so what do you like about your marriage partner? They'll say, he's a nice guy. What don't you like? And they come out with War and Peace. One of the things that I have come to see when I think about unforgiveness in its relationship to gratitude, and from what I understand, from my little bit I've been reading now in terms of what makes a successful couple, gratitude may top the list. I mean, it's hard to know like the ranking of it, but there has been some recent research on the incredible importance of just being thankful for what your partner does. Just flat out thankful. But I think of it in terms of, because I know how many people that I've talked to who ask, how could they do that cruelty? How could they do that unkindness? Weren't they thinking? What the hell were they thinking? What's wrong with them? So this question of where does this unkindness come from? And more importantly, because they don't really care where it comes from, they just want to know why it came to them. Like they couldn't care less if it came someplace else. Like go slaughter 50 people in Syria, I don't care. Just don't do anything to me. I mean, that's our basic take on the day. Don't do anything to me, but I'll read the paper and see that 300 people were bombed here and 180, were an avalanche and 300 fell off a train and 200,000 starved to death. That's all fine. Just give me my coffee on time. I mean, that's our attitude. Don't be late. Don't make me wait in line at the supermarket because I'm important. But what do I care that, thousands of people starve to death? So there's a basic problem with our consciousness of how it is that we orient ourselves, which predisposes us to a lack of forgiveness. The gratitude piece is the simplest entree into changing that. So one of the ways that, I have thought about this is anybody who's in a committed partnership, you want to think about, all the ways you're loved that you couldn't possibly have caused. It's like humility training, which is at the heart of forgiveness. If I think of the one quality that is most in alignment with forgiveness, it's humility. I'm not the center of anything. I'm not that great. I didn't contribute that much to the world. Why wouldn't it harm me every now and then? It harms everybody else. But the piece in a relationship is, like, I don't know how to put this. Nobody has to do your laundry. Nobody has to go to work. Nobody has to feed your child. Nobody has to love you. You're not that important. You're not that valuable. It's a wonderful thing that people do this, but we don't see it at all. The narcissism is so dense that we don't even see what people do. I mean, mea culpa. I think it was 15 years being married before I noticed that she didn't have to do the laundry. I'm just, really? It's not just done by the laundry fairy? I thought that's who came in and did it. But what I'm getting at is the basic consciousness that we're all struggling against. It's a very basic thing we're struggling against, to get over ourselves. One of the studies that I read about couples, which was really interesting, and I don't know the exact particulars of it. They did some couple thing, which is very common, is you stick a couple in a room and you ask them to have an argument. I know that sounds weird, because most couples will do it without having to be stuck in a room. They don't need any prompting to have an argument. But what they would do is they would film and evaluate how the couple fought. Gottman did this work to develop most of his couple knowledge. I don't know that this was his, but I remember seeing the study. And what was so fascinating was they were trying to relate couples in trouble to how much good they saw in the partner. So during the argument, if in any actual couple, there will be repair moments. So like partner A can be saying to partner B, I don't like you, you do this, this, and this. But a healthier couple, when they say this and they notice the reaction in the couple that they've been hurt, they stop for a second and say, you okay? Are we getting too intense? Or let me put my hand on your knee and just show you we're still in this together. Or I'm sorry, or they'll crack a joke. Look at me, I'm all tense. I'm like Attila the Hun here, and it's just my wife. But they'll do something to repair at some point. The interesting thing was these repair things are happening all the time in decent couples, all the time. Like they're attuned to each other, and it's not that they're afraid of saying, I don't like you, what you did is wrong, I don't want this. But they don't lose sight of the fact that, he's a human being. But what was fascinating was when they had a confederate or an observer watching this, and then they asked the couples, what did your partner do to be nice to you? List all the things. The distressed couples were the ones that didn't see it clearly. The happy couples, they saw it accurately. That goes against so much of the BS we tell ourselves about life, that you have to be realistic and you have to be hard and, the world isn't da-da-da-da. Well, it turned out that the couples that saw it accurately, I noticed when he reached out to me. I noticed when he said this. I noticed when he took a breath. I noticed when he turned away or said, my wife's a good soul. I noticed all that. The happier couples were the ones that saw the good. The unhappy couples were unhappy because they didn't see the good. They were too wrapped up in their own negativity. Okay? There was another, and this experiment I don't know exactly, but because it's fuzzy in my brain, but it was relating gratitude to couple satisfaction. And if you had gratitude for what they did, well, duh, you were better off in the relationship. It doesn't mean that your partner's better than the partner that's not grateful. It just means you have something. And it turns out that because we have very, very, very simple, most of us, minds, when somebody says thank you for doing that, it reinforces you're doing it, right? Like if they say, oh, how nice of you to clean up, that's going to get more of a response than you schmuck. Why didn't you clean up? I mean, this is all duh. All duh. But so the gratitude piece is what I sense, gratitude and humility and compassion, or what I sense lacking in our world that doesn't forgive well. A person who cultivates gratitude sees enough of the good in their life to be able to hold some of the bad. Like, wait, I know. I know that I've been given X, Y, and Z, and I have all these benefits and opportunities. Well, I can, okay, so this crap happens. It's like, it's okay. It's not good, but it's okay. Those who don't practice gratitude tend, my belief is, to have a little more free-floating hostility. That, wait a second, the world's not giving me what I need. Nobody's nourishing me. So when somebody really doesn't nourish, they want to really hurt. And it's very easy to cultivate gratitude. It's very easy. I mean, it's like Oprah wants you to do it. You know what I mean? It doesn't get easier and more simple than that if she's promoting it. No, I'm serious. It's like then it's like universal stuff. And it's a very simple thing. It's like asking yourself at some level, what kindness was sent my way that I didn't fully see? What kindness was offered me that I was too busy for, too preoccupied for, or that whatever it is I've taken it for granted. That's where our minds need to be occupied to balance out the almost obsessive way that we examine all the things that weren't the way we wanted. Like what I've seen is you don't need to go into the wounds so much as place the wounds in context. So if you thought, wow, okay, so this person really mistreated me, but these 6 have been really nice to me. Well, why aren't I jumping all over myself to say thank you to the 6? Why am I obsessed with the one that's not? What's that say about me? Right? So this is a way of using the mind, but not fighting or resisting unkindness. You can't resist it, it's everywhere. But it means that you don't have to dwell in the wound. And that's what our forgiveness project understood, that I believe has enabled our project to have more reach than any other forgiveness work that I've seen. That it's saying that, shit will happen. Expect it. Prepare for it. I mean, you can't fully prepare for it, but prepare for it. But hold that within a container of the world's also rich and loving and nourishing. And I'm not the center of the universe. And people suffer everywhere. So what's the strategy for dealing with the world as it actually is? That's the container that we set to hold forgiveness. And we've done this with some pretty horrendous things and some pretty nothing things. I've talked to people whose neighbors put their fence 2 inches on their property, and they're apoplectic. They've come into my classes acting like somebody shot up their whole family. What, are you kidding me? What were they thinking? The property line ends here and their fence is here. And I don't know what the hell's wrong with them and how could they do this? And on and on and on and on and on and on. You know, one of the things that was very interesting when we started doing our research, because I was really interested in is, are long ago things harder to forgive or current things? Are things from people close to you harder to forgive or things from people that you don't know? And what I found out was, generally speaking, the hardest thing to forgive is what happened to me. Short, long, well-known, unknown, it doesn't matter. And then I make up a whole theory about why it's harder to forgive what happened to me. So I remember being in a class, and I asked the class, it was, maybe not quite this big, but, a number of people. I asked the class, so tell me which is harder to forgive. Somebody you cared for who betrays you, or somebody you don't know at all. So depending on what the hurt was, that's how they responded. So somebody would say, well, I can never forgive my brother because we grew up together. And, how could they do that after all we went through as children? Okay, fine. Then somebody else would say, but wait a second, it's very easy to forgive your brother because you have nice times, like you have balance. It's like, of course, my brother's going to do this because 4,700 other times or whatever it is, he was nice and he's not nice and it's my brother. Other people would say, well, it's really easy to forgive somebody that you don't know because they don't mean anything to you. And then somebody else would say, well, it's impossible to forgive somebody you don't know. At least if I know them, I have some way of explaining it to myself. But how do I explain indiscriminate cruelty? I did some work with people whose family members were killed in the attacks on 9/11. I did some work in New York around that. And I remember that was part of the brutal horror for some of those people. That it just felt like bad luck. Why would my son? They don't know him. He was just working in that building, or he was walking across the street, or he was in the subway station and got up to get a newspaper. But how could I ever forgive somebody whose hatred was so indiscriminate that they didn't care that it was my son? They would have killed anybody. But that's what's so unforgivable, that, of course, maybe I could forgive something if I understood the genesis. My son had done something, or they saw my son as something, but they don't know my son from anybody. How do you forgive that? Like, it's so unimaginable. So the thing is, what I have come to see is forgiveness is mostly a question in our mind of what we believe the world to be, how we believe people should act, and what it is that we think is fair for us. It has much less to do with the actual event. Now, the caveat to that is many things that happen to us require grieving. And so it's not like forgiveness happens like 15 minutes after somebody does something really hurtful to you. There's a period of suffering that is essential, called grief. Where you feel all those emotions, all the terror and the horror and the vulnerability and the rage and all the outgrowths of hope, of helplessness. And those can take months to heal. Forgiveness is, in my estimation, like the natural end of the grieving process. That you grieve and the wounds are raw and real, and then you let them go. But that's what forgiveness is. It's not a substitute for grief, and it doesn't interdict pain totally. It can't. Because we human beings, first of all, are strongly attached, biologically to other human beings. And certain wounds rip apart the schemas that we have about life. They just rip them apart. And to restabilize can take time, even a lot of time. You know, when a child is murdered, we have this schema of this young person is going to outlive me, is going to carry on my experience. I'm the one who's going to go first. And then when something happens to that, not only is there the loss of the human being, but there's the loss of the understanding about how life is supposed to be, and it's a massive accommodation to bring the reality in line with the way we held it, which is what most of forgiveness is. When people don't want to forgive their parents, what they're actually saying is, it's too challenging for me to change my understanding of life. It's too hard and I don't want to do the work. I want to believe that parents are supposed to be kind and caring and supportive and generous and loving. And I had a parent that didn't meet that standard for me, whether it's true or not. And I'm unwilling to do the work to integrate reality, which is not all parents do that. My parent may not have, and maybe my expectation was out of line. But to work to integrate that reality, to be able to come up with a more true reality, which is many, many parents fail to provide a safe home for their children. Many parents. And many children, as a result, have to struggle to gain emotional maturity and competence. That's a gray, nuanced, it doesn't, it accepts that it would be wonderful if everybody were raised well, but they're not. Now what do we do? But that takes a flexible mind, and it takes an ability to hold pain and not have to have an enemy with the pain. That there's a cognitive accommodation to reality. And I see how hard that is for so many people. I only have a few minutes left. This all started for me when I was very badly hurt. Like not the reason I started teaching forgiveness, but the genesis for this experience and my willingness, for whatever reason, to go into my own flaws and weaknesses, which were pretty extensive. My very close friend betrayed me. This was a long time ago. And betrayed me in a way that there was no map at all that this was even possible. Like, I thought this was my closest buddy, and that we were going to be close buddies, forever, or whatever forever meant. And so not only did the wound hurt dramatically, but I had no mental place for this. Like many people have that with their marriage. There's no place for the fact that my wife or husband may be a cheater, or may be the one to leave, or may be abusive, or whatever it is. There's no cognitive space in there. I had no cognitive space for the fact that this person may betray me. And when that happened, I was devastated, both on the emotional level, but more in this world is not a safe world at all, because there's nothing I can depend on. None of my conceptions of how life should be were true. And so it completely destabilized me, which is, I see what happens to people all over the world when events happen that they don't have a place to hold them. They have all this almost fantasy of the way life is. And then reality intrudes. Well, for the good or for bad, it took me years to recover from this, years. And I did, and this is the reason that, I'm a reasonably effective forgiveness teacher. It's almost like the alcoholic who can go back and counsel and see all the bullshit that the people who are still drinking give, because they've been there. Well, I saw my own BS. Like it was, I saw myself, just to give you an example, I would be talking to somebody, and somebody would ask me about this person, and I would start out like I was a reasonable human being for about 2 sentences, and then I'd attack the heck out of them. But I had this little veneer of like, I'm a reasonable person, I'm not psychopathic, and then about 4 seconds later, like foam's coming out of my mouth, and somehow I made that his fault. Like I had such an interesting system that I could behave terribly, and that was his fault. And even years after that, if I brought him up, it was his fault. Like, what makes me 2 years later need to bring that up? But any time I had an opportunity to make him appear like a bad guy, I took it. Gleefully. I alternated between depressed and angry. I created a whole victim persona for myself, which was partly true. This is what I'm getting at. If he could do this to me, then I'm not safe. And that's true. It's what do I do in a world where I'm not safe, where the armoring of my heart and the anger, that's not a good answer. But the question is a right one. Since he could do this to me, anything can happen. That's true. That's flat out true. Where I went off the rails is, well, because of that, I'm going to be bitter and mistrustful and take every opportunity to tell the world that I don't agree with how it treated me. That was my solution to a truth that I didn't want to hold. But everybody who's hurt struggles with that. Everybody. If my husband could lie like this, there is no total security and stability. That's true. That's just true. But the answer is not in becoming hostile. And that's the experiment that human beings have been doing since human beings have come on the planet. When we recognize that it's not safe, which is always, to protect ourselves, we become more selfish. And I don't believe that that's the solution that is best oriented for us, both as individuals and as a group. Forgiveness allows us to say that, yes, this hurt was awful, was inappropriate, was wrong, was anything, but I'm not going to allow that to change my character for the worse. That's what it does. Like, it doesn't deny the harm. I was on the radio a few times and interviewed just recently about the shootings in Charleston and how quickly some of those family members forgave. And I had been interviewed a decade ago when the Amish murders, where nickel mines were occurred. And it's a very tricky thing, because there are some religious people who have so practiced forgiveness and so practiced an understanding that when something happens, that's what they have to offer, that it's true for them. But for other people, the forgiveness serves as an attempt to not feel the horror of it, and to not feel with compassion how often people are harmed. Like, that's not an appropriate use. I mean, it's better than going out and killing somebody, but it's not the deepest use of forgiveness. The deepest use of forgiveness is that we live in a very difficult, challenging world of great harm and injustice. And that while we can forgive the individual perpetrators of it, because we have to, it doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to continue to try to have our hearts open to make the world a better place. That being harmed, many of us use that to step away from a kind of trust in the world. That I can't trust anymore. And you see that all the time in relationships. Somebody was in a 20-year marriage where they find out that the hubby has been having a long affair. And I'm not trusting anymore. Now, the truth is it can take a while to trust again. But the deeper understanding is even from the beginning of any relationship, it's guaranteed to end. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like front-loading the wisdom a little. It's teaching this. So when you enter into a relationship, you know that relationship is going to end. And it ends either by death or by mistreatment or neglect or indifference, but it's going to end. And so if we looked a little more carefully at what this world is, and we developed a better schema for what it was and how it was that we're going to respond to it, then we would handle more skillfully the stuff that happens. So, and I'm going to stop in a minute, what I have developed, and I'll do a little bit of it in an hour, is some methods for doing this, and they asked me to do a workshop kind of thing for an hour or so too. Just some very simple methods for helping people become like a little more grateful, a little quieter inside, have a little more humility, and just, to realize, again, this is the bottom line realization, that unfortunately, I have to work on my nervous system. Like, no matter what happened, in the present, I got to work on my responses. And there are very reasonably simple, proven ways for doing that. I mean, meditation and prayer and exercise and affirmation and goodwill and all these stuff. But all these things practiced, they work on our nervous system. And so, not with complete assurance, but with some assurance, we can take people from all sorts of difficult things and orient them to saying, okay, yes, this painful thing happened, but at some level, what you need to work on is your mind and nervous system now, so that you release to some degree the past's hold on you, and you're more, you're just more in present life. And as all sorts of converging evidence shows, that's good for people, to be more in present life. Anyway, thank you.
You have been a spiritual friend and counselor to me for years, and I can't remember even what the problem was. I was calling you up crying about something or bemoaning a situation, and you said to me, for whoever it was had done something to me, it was a deep betrayal. I can't even remember who or what it was. And you said, you want to change it, pray for them. And I went, I cannot pray for them. You want me to pray for them? Yes.
I say to people in my lectures all the time, okay, here's your homework. Pray for that person's happiness for 30 days. Every morning,
I know.
5 minutes if you can, because that's what alchemy is. If I pray for somebody
who is causing me harm, right, or I feel has harmed me.
But if I pray, your greatest power to change the world, the Course in Miracles says, is your power to change your mind about the world.
Yes.
And all minds are joined. There's really no place where you stop and I start. So if I pray for you, if I pray for your happiness, my mind one of two things will happen. Either you will behave differently or I won't care. The alchemy will occur, and I will be
But in the
lifted.
beginning, it's hard. You know, if somebody has
Yeah.
really harmed you, because I remember when you told me that, I was like, okay, I'm going to pray for them. You can't even bring yourself to, I mean, how do you pray for somebody who you feel has really, really harmed you?
So what? It's easy to sit there with the anger and the toxicity and the bitterness. That's easy. When people say this is hard, what's hard is walking around with this anger. That's even harder.
And blame.
And
You know,
blame.
and one of the things that you say
And-
in Return to Love is that it's so much easier to bless someone than to blame them. So that's what you're
And
talking
not
about.
immediately.
And not immediately.
But
That's what I'm
also-
saying. It's hard to do immediately.
But since the universe is self-organizing and self-correcting, if anybody did anything to me that harmed me, if anybody did anything to me that was a transgression or betrayal, the universe is already on it. The universe has a way to make sure that I get whatever in the material world that person took away from me. I call that the principle of divine compensation. But if my heart is closed, then I won't be able to receive the miraculous new possibility that
That's
the universe
interesting.
is bringing.
The principle of divine compensation, not the same thing as reciprocity, as what
No,
goes out,
it's
come back.
different.
It's different?
It's the divine compensation means if I have an experience of you,
Yes.
and I do something where I deflect a miracle, something wonderful that might have happened, and I deflect that miracle. Or if you were to do something that deflected a miracle. The miracle, the possibility, what might have been blocked by me. The possibility might have been blocked by you. But the Course in Miracles says it is held in trust for you by the Holy Spirit until you are ready to receive it. So, as long as I keep my heart open, the universe will just find another vessel. Will find another way. It could be another person, it could be another time, it could be
to come
another
back to you.
situation, or it could, yes, but it's there in the universe. Whatever love is yours. And the love that is yours is by definition the love that the universe, as the handwriting of God, intends, because just like the embryo turns into a baby and the bud blossoms, your life is already programmed in the mind of God to its highest creative possibility. Everything fabulous that could happen is already programmed in the ethers of the universe. The blueprint is already there.
So does it matter then what I do?
Yes, because it's like a file in a computer. If my heart's not open, I don't download the possibility on earth as it is in heaven. So it's a file, it's an undeletable file. But if I don't bring it down to the screen, if I stay in bitterness, what I'll get on the screen is bitter. That doesn't mean it's not in the computer. It just means
made
it's
my
not what
eyes
I
water.
pushed in the...
I just got that in the biggest way.
Yeah,
That is really good.
yeah, that's a great...
That's good. I need to take a break. That's really good. I just got that. It's all there, and you just need to download it. And God's always...
The greatest human goal is peace of mind, and the greatest obstacle to peace of mind is anger and blame aimed at other people. In order to eliminate anger and blame, you have to learn to forgive. And there are 4 people that you need to forgive if you're really serious about changing your life and learning how to live in the present. The first people you have to forgive are your parents, living or dead. You must absolutely forgive them for every mistake they ever made in bringing you up. At the very least, you should be grateful to them for giving you life. They got you here. If you're happy to be alive, you can forgive them for everything else. Never complain about them again. Many of my seminar participants have phoned or visited their parents after the seminar and told them that they forgive them for everything and for every mistake they ever made bringing them up. Often this simple act of courage and character on your part has had a profound effect on their relationship with their mother or father. From that day onward, they become good friends with their parents, which then lasted for the rest of their lives together. On the other hand, by not forgiving your parents, you remain forever a child. You block your own chance to grow up and become a fully functioning adult. You continue to see yourself as a victim of your parents, a victim of your childhood. And even worse, you keep your negative feelings of inferiority and anger alive inside yourself. If your parents die without your having forgiven them, it can bother you for the rest of your life. The second persons you must forgive are the people from your marriages or relationships that didn't work out. These intimate relationships can be so intense and so threatening to your feelings of self-esteem and self-worth that you can become angry and unforgiving toward these people for years. But remember, you were at least partially responsible for the relationships in your life that didn't work out. Have the personal strength and integrity to say those magic words, "I am responsible." And then think of ways that you were responsible for the relationship rather than thinking of reasons why the other person is to blame. Forgive the other person and let him or her go. Say these words, "I forgive him or her for everything, and I wish him or her well." Each time you repeat this, the negative emotion attached to the memory will diminish, almost like turning down the heat on a pot. It gets cooler and cooler, and soon it will be gone forever. Many of my seminar graduates have found that the letter is the key to putting a bad relationship behind them forever. This is a powerful technique that I learned many years ago and that can free you from feelings of anger and resentment almost instantly. It can liberate you from the negativity of a past relationship in a matter of seconds. Here's how it works. What you do is you sit down and you write the other person a letter of forgiveness. This letter consists of 3 parts. First, you say, "I forgive you for everything you ever did that hurt me." Second, you write out a description or list of every single thing that you're still angry about. Some people write several pages in this part, what you did, what you said, what you didn't do, and so on. They get it all on paper. And third, you end the letter with these words, "I wish you well." You then take the letter to the mailbox and drop it in. Or if you're using email, and I prefer to do it on paper, if you're using email, press send. At that moment, you will feel a huge sense of relief and you'll be free at last. By the way, don't worry about how the other person might react. This is not your concern. Your goal is to free yourself. It's to regain your peace of mind and to get on with the wonderful life that lies ahead of you. Now, the third person you must forgive is everyone else in your life who has ever hurt you in any way. Let them go. Forgive every boss, every business partner, friend or crook or betrayer who has ever caused you grief of any kind. Clean the slate and forgive and forget. Wipe away each of their names and wipe the images off by just saying, whenever you think of them, "I forgive him or her for everything and I wish them well. I forgive them for everything and I wish them well." You just repeat this statement every time you think of the other person or situation until the negative emotions actually disappear. It's the most amazing darn thing. Again, when you start to say it initially, when you think of the other person and they make you mad, you won't see much of a reaction. But as you keep saying it, "I forgive them and wish them well. I forgive them and wish them well," your temperature goes down and down and down, and like a fire with no fuel, it finally goes cold and all the emotion is gone. The fourth and final person you have to forgive is yourself. You must absolutely forgive yourself for every silly, senseless, wicked, brainless, thoughtless, or cruel thing that you've ever done or said. Stop carrying these past mistakes around with you. That was then, and this is now. Think of it this way. When you did those things in the past that you still feel badly about, you were not the person that you are today. At that time, you were a different person. You were younger and less experienced. You were not your true self as you are today. You were an immature version of the person that you have become with experience. So stop beating yourself up for something that occurred in the past, something that a different person did, not you, and something that you cannot change. Just say the words, "I forgive myself for every mistake I ever made. I am a thoroughly good person and I'm going to have a wonderful future." Even better, you can add the words, "I love myself unconditionally." When you love yourself unconditionally, you let yourself go. Now, whenever you think of that past event or situation or person that you hurt or did something untoward to, just repeat, I forgive myself completely. And then get on with your life. Focus on the future rather than the past, and don't look back. Look at where you're going rather than where you've been. And finally, if you did something that hurt someone and you still feel badly about it, you can go to that person or write and apologize. Just tell the person you're sorry for what you did or said. Whatever his or her reaction, positive or negative, it doesn't matter. The very act of repentance, of expressing regret, will set you free.
What is the process to forgiveness? How do you start the process to forgive?
I think it's just the same thing you would do with accounting. You have to balance the books. You have to come to a conclusion about your life or you're going to be miserable all of your life. And in the process of balancing the books, you have to get an understanding also not only of your situation, because a lot of times unforgiveness is a very selfish thing. It's based on what happened to you. You also have to understand that this person may not be able to give you what they didn't have. Just because you wanted it and even had a right to get it doesn't mean that I have it in the warehouse of my personality to complete the inventory of your need.
Forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is you. See, your unwillingness to forgive another person is like you sipping the poison, waiting on them to die. You can't sip the poison of unforgiveness and expect them to die. Forgiveness is for you. Something else I heard somebody say. You can't drive your car looking in the rearview mirror. You can't. If you keep looking in the rearview mirror, you're gonna keep crashing your car. There's a reason why the rearview mirror is this big and the windshield is this big. That's a reason for it. Because all the rearview mirror does is allows you to see what you've passed and to prevent what you've passed from coming up on you again. That's all the rearview mirror is for. The windshield is your future. It's where you're going. It's where you're headed. I hope you all picked up this today. And think about that, how that affects your life. If you got someone who you feel has wronged you and you carrying that, that's like a cancer. And all it's doing is eating away at you. Do you know how many people I've had to forgive that have never asked me for forgiveness? You know how many people I just let go so I could just go where God had for me? Because I just ain't had no more time to spend no more time thinking about that. Let that be a lesson to you. You know what my father told me a long time ago? He said, son, when a fool is talking, listen very carefully. Because listening to a fool is important. Because knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. Look, man, if you got something that's been bothering you in your life, get past it. See, if God wakes you up in the morning, it's a sign from God that he ain't through with you yet. That's why he wakes you up. When he's done with you, you won't wake up no more. But as long as he got something for you, he keeps waking you up. Why don't you wake up to go see what that is? He done got you past whatever it was. Whatever it was that's been on you, he done really brought you through it. Because he keeps waking, you're done. Don't lay that wallowing in your past, man. Your past is back there. I would rather show the world what love do through forgiveness than sit up in here and win a damn argument.
Most of us have been hurt, we've been abused, we've been through something.
Absolutely.
And it's very hard to forgive. What really is the benefit to the person who needs to forgive? What's in it for them?
The benefits are countless. In fact, there's more in it for the person who forgives than it is the person who is forgiven. It is more blessed to give it than it is to receive it, because forgiveness cuts the umbilical cord between you and the event that has attached itself to your life. And then forgiveness opens your heart so that you can see more clearly. The Bible said that pure in heart shall see God. So when your heart is contaminated, you can't see God. You can't see his glory and his face and understand him. But most importantly, importantly, it has health benefits, less stress, you sleep better, you're more creative, you're more resourceful. It affects every aspect of your life, and you are more eligible to work in higher regimes of life if you can deal with offenses, cast them off, and keep your mind focused on the greater good.
Wow. Now, speaking of all of the benefits, I think about the Lord's Prayer. Most of us learn that when we're very young.
Right.
And there's one, I don't want to say little line because it's very profound, but there's a line in there about forgiveness. Tell us a little bit about what that means for us.
I think that line really was the catalyst that inspired the entire book. It said to forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I always stumbled over that because I thought, do I really want God to treat me the way I treat someone who has hurt me? And that really caused me to begin to examine my own heart about how I am supposed to be a conduit of God's personality. But in fact, some of God's grace and mercy, it flows to me, but does not flow through me. And so this is a cathartic moment that allows you to allow that grace to pass through your heart, that you might pass it on to other people. And when you do that, you actually receive forgiveness as you allocate it into the lives of other people.
So the people who say, God forgiving you is contingent on you forgiving others, is that accurate or maybe a little different
Well,
from?
that's what you're asking for in that prayer. You're saying, God, forgive me as I forgive those who trespass against me. Now, I think God in his mercy looks beyond our mistakes and often allocates forgiveness to us that we don't perpetuate in the lives of other people. But it is our responsibility as a Christian to perpetuate that grace. And the pain of giving it to someone who is guilty causes you to understand how you have pained the heart of God, and yet he allocates grace to us every day.
Wow, that is so amazing.
Yeah.
Now, there's probably someone watching right now, and they're thinking, Bishop, that's easier said than done. You don't know what I've been through. I've been abused. I've been raped. I've been abandoned, rejected. They've been through some great things. What are some steps they can take toward forgiveness?
First of all, it is not easy, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. I certainly don't want to oversimplify it and suggest that it is easy to let it go, but just because something isn't easy doesn't mean that it should not be done. And it's very important to do it. And secondly, many of us have been abused. We've been through all types of horrible things that you have suggested, but remember that Christ was dying on the cross, and he did it while he was bleeding to death. So if you've been anything short of bleeding to death on the cross, you ought to be able to look at that example and perpetuate it. One of the things that I think is very, very important, we have to understand that there's nothing wrong with being angry, okay? The Bible tells us to be angry, but not to stay angry. So when the Bible said anger resteth in the bosom of fools, you've got to be able to dispel it. The second thing that's important, you need to be able to confront a person and have your say. A lot of times it's hard to bring closure to something where you have not expressed yourself. And stick to the issue. Don't violate the individual. Let's stick to the issue. I don't like what you did. That doesn't equate to I don't like you. Sometimes we become personal and we lose all ability and all credibility because we personalize the injury as if the person is no good when in fact the thing that they did is not good. And say, you've done many wonderful things. I thank God for who you are. This one thing right here really, really bothered me and it's affecting how I feel about you. Let's not be juvenile and just throw out the baby with the water. And if you can do that and be objective in your pain, then God can select you to work in so many more arenas because you are objective about the issue.
Amen. Now, as we wrap this up, I want to ask you, maybe there's a personal story you have that you're willing to share with us where you've had to actually forgive someone.
Oh, I share many of them in the book. There's a lot of them, and I was fairly transparent about them. But the one that immediately pops to mind is one of my children stole some money from me during their adolescent years. Yeah, and it wasn't the money. It wasn't the money. It was that they stole it from me. And, I would have given it to you. And for some reason, I was deeply, deeply hurt about that. And then later I realized how bad my pain had hurt them. And because I love my child more than I love the whole issue, I went back and said, you know what, it's not even important. He burst into tears and cried, Daddy, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make it right. I did something wrong. And if you don't create an atmosphere where flawed people can still be loved, then who are we? And then if you create that atmosphere for your children, how much more for the children of God? The person that you're angry with is somebody's child.
Yeah.
and learning to flow into that arena of forgiveness, because sometimes people make mistakes. I mean, grievous, heinous mistakes that really give you pain, infidelity, really painful things. What they did is bad, but that doesn't mean who they are is bad.
Love and kindness.
What was the awakening moment for you that you realized that there was more to, quote, religion, more to life than what appeared to be?
Probably the most important moment of my life occurred when I was 34 years old, just a few years before I met you. I went to my father's grave. I was sent there by a series of just mystical kinds of things that just could never have happened. You could never intellectually explain how I got to my father's grave, because this was a man I grew up hating. I mean, bitterly hating. My two brothers didn't care, but I was angry at him all the time, and I would have bad dreams about him. I'd wake up punching him, and I'd be in a cold sweat and so on. And I ended up at his grave in 1974. The story's too long to tell. I've written about it in many of my books, and told the story. But I stood at my father's grave August the 27th, 1974, just before I wrote Your Erroneous Sounds. And my life was out of control at that time. I was overweight. I was in bad relationships. I was heading for death, really. I was eating terribly. And my writing wasn't going well. Nothing much was working. And I stood at my father's grave, and I went to my father's grave to do something on his grave that I wouldn't even want to talk about here. And just as I was leaving the gravesite, I was called back, almost like mystically, and I just said, from this moment on, I send you love. I forgive you. Who am I to judge you and tell you what your life should have been?
But you went there to do the opposite.
I went there because I just wanted to have closure. I really always just wanted to meet this man, and I didn't even know he had been dead, and he'd been dead 10 years before I even found out that he had been dead. So that was a major turning point in my life.
When you could feel the love.
Yeah.
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 Forgive.
Yeah. There's that wonderful line that Mark Twain says, that forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And it's this beautiful idea of being able to send love regardless of what comes your way. Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds
on the heel that has crushed it.
On the heel that has crushed it. You know about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's beautiful.
You've had to do some of that yourself, I know.
Yes, we all, if you live long enough, you do.
Yeah, and there's this old idea that if you pursue revenge, you'd better dig 2 graves because it'll kill you.
It'll kill you.
Yeah, it'll kill you.
Holding anger for someone else is like taking your own poison.
Right. And I often feel, Oprah, that maybe he incarnated into this life just to teach his youngest son, who he never met and he walked away from, how to forgive. And because of that, I've been able to affect the lives of millions of people all over the planet, on all different languages. And for me, it just after I walked away from that gravesite in August of '74, I was teaching at St. John's University. I was a professor up there. I rented
What were you teaching?
I was teaching counseling psychology to graduate students. I flew down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, rented an apartment in the Spindrift Motel, and I wrote Your Erroneous Sounds in 14 days.
Wow.
Cover to cover, without any notes, without any struggle. I had been struggling with my writing. I had been writing textbooks. And today that book is like 60 million copies, 47 languages all over the world. I mean, it was just everything in my life turned around when I got the rage, the hatred, the anger out of my heart. And today I write about and live something called divine love, a kind of love that never varies, a love that never changes, a love that you have for everything. For this mountain, for these trucks, for these people, for these lights, for these clouds. It's like that kind of love. That's the love I'm working on and living every day.
Our vulnerability allows us to be hurt. But our vulnerability allows us to be loved. If we were tough and totally in control, there's no space for love. There's no intimacy. There's no softness. So the same vulnerability that allows us to be hurt allows us to be intimate, connected, and love. And the same free will that allows everybody to screw up allows us off to choose all the incredible goodness we do. The basic choice we each have to make is which we want to pay more attention to. That's our basic choice for happiness. Do you want to dwell over and over and over and over again to try to protect yourself from what went wrong, what you didn't get, who didn't love you, how it didn't work out? Or do you want to see the free choice and goodness behind every act of care that has ever been given to you? Because you want to, we all do, we want to examine the free choice of all the people who have been unkind. What's wrong with them? Or why did I screw up? What the hell's wrong with me? That's examining the free choice. But if you're going to do that, examine with free choice every single act of goodness that has come your way, and you will have your mind exploded. Because then you connect with this unbelievable good mystery of care and love. And that's where you want to spend more of your time. So you can't do both. You can't be obsessed with why people didn't love you and fully open to those who have. You can, obviously it's not 100-0, but you're going to have to make some dispositional choice of whether you want to be more examining, wow, how the heck did that person come home again and still listen to me? What the heck was that? What goodness was that? Rather than, wow, they again forgot to put this away. That's your choice. But the more you can fill yourself with, wow, the free will allowed them to be loving, the more forgiving you are.
If people can understand that as long as they don't forgive, they're poisoning themselves. It's like hating somebody who's hurt you is like taking poison hoping they'll die. It's like me being mad at somebody who hurt me that's out having a good time and don't even care that I'm mad. That doesn't hurt them.
No.
And so maybe this husband's been gone 20 years and he's been having a good time in life and, he's married again and whatever. And he couldn't care less that she's mad and still suffering.
He's moved on, sadly, but
he's moved on. And so it's pointless. It's like, okay, you hurt me, but now if I'm going to hate you, then I'm letting you continue to hurt me.
And have control in my life.
And you're controlling my life, and I'm not going to do that. But, John, I think the other part of this is, and I think this is very important, I think a lot of people want to forgive, but they don't know how to do it.
Okay.
And so, as I've pondered this and studied it and prayed about it, the things that I feel like I've learned from God is this. First of all, to do anything, you need to do it the way God tells you to do it. And so he said, several different places in the Bible, that you pray for your enemies. So first of all, are you praying for people that have hurt you? Well, what do you pray? We're like, well, I don't really want them to be blessed. I'm not going to pray for them to be blessed.
God, don't bless those people.
But the truth is really, you can take somebody that's really hurt you and ask God to bless them. And the first thing he's going to bless them with is revelation of what they've done. Because they can't really have a right relationship with him if they don't admit what they've done and come to a place of truth in their life. God desires truth in the inner being, was what King David said after his shenanigans with Bathsheba, and he went a whole year without confessing his sin, I guess making all kinds of excuses for it. Then in Psalm 51, the great prayer that he prayed, he said, you desire truth in the inner being. So every person, before they can have a right relationship with God, they have to face the truth. You can't get to where you need to be if you don't face the truth about where you're at. And so forgiveness, I don't think you can ever walk through. I can decide I'm going to forgive somebody, but I can't walk it out in my life if there's not some things that I realize. First of all, God's not asking me to feel differently about them. He's asking me to pray, to bless and not curse, which, if you study that, it means to speak well of instead of evil of. So I need to stop talking about them in an unkind way.
Change your vocabulary.
Change your vocabulary. So when I talk about what my dad did to me, I don't do it to put him down. I do it to help other people. So if I'm talking about it with a good motive, that's one thing, but if I'm talking about it just to be talking about it,
And out of your own pain.
and out of my own pain
Yeah.
and out of my own bitterness, then that's another story. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go get counseling if you need it or something like that, but bless your enemies and do not curse them. How many times do we read that and don't even have a clue what it's talking about? So I pray for you. I pray that God will bless you. I pray you'll be saved. I pray that God will open your eyes. You know, I pray in obedience to God. And I mean, I've even prayed and said, you know, God, I don't really want you to bless them, but you told me to pray for that, so I'm going to.
And God's not uncomfortable with that prayer.
Yeah,
God can
I'm
handle
going to
that.
pray in obedience anyway. And then I make a decision to stop talking about them.
Yeah.
And then I decide what I'm going to do. I pray, I trust. And then even if I still feel like I'm angry, I don't say, well, I haven't forgiven because I still feel this way. I say, God, I've done my part. Now your part is to change how I feel. And so an example that I can think of, if you want to take this a little bit further, there was somebody that I went to church with one time that hurt me really, really, really bad. I mean, really bad. I won't get into the details, but one night we were in church and the pastor did what pastors love to do. We'll go and hug somebody and tell them you love them. So I turn, the first person I see is her, and I'm thinking, ain't no way no way am I hugging you and telling you I love you.
Yeah.
But I knew in the pit of my gut that that's what God wanted me to do. Okay, well, I didn't want to. I didn't feel like it. But you can still do in obedience to God what He tells you to do, even if you don't want to and you don't feel like it. And those are the things really I think that break the enemy's power off of us. When no matter how we feel, we will go and obey God anyway.
Yeah, it is that we don't go by feelings, we go by faith, and we go in obedience. And then when we take that step of obedience, God gives a power and a blessing to us for that act of obedience.
But you know, a lot of times we learn little nifty phrases like that. We walk by faith and not by sight, but we don't really apply it to a situation like that.
Yeah.
And so I had to literally, in faith, go and do what God told me to, even though I didn't feel like it. And you know what I've learned that's really good? When you do what's right, when you feel all wrong about it, boy, that's when you're growing spiritually.
That's the stretch.
That's the stretch. That's when you're growing spiritually. And you know what? Of course, it's been a long journey, and I didn't learn this overnight. I won't stay mad at somebody now. It's just, I'm not doing that. I don't have time to be angry. I'm not wasting any more of my life being mad at people.
It's so unproductive.
That doesn't mean that I don't get hurt. It doesn't mean that it's easy. But, you know, the Bible says to bless those who curse you. And one of the things that's great to do, I tell pastors all the time, if you have some young man that you've mentored and loved and he splits your church and takes 100 of your people down the street and starts his own church, don't hate him, buy him a sound system.
Go take up an offering for him.
Go take up an offering for him. Because
that's the way to do it.
Because we overcome evil with good.
That's right.
I mean, Romans 12:21. I'm getting the devil back now every day that I open my mouth and share God's word. That's how I get the devil back, not by hating the man who hurt me.
When you bury negative feelings, they never die. Like toxic waste, they're going to resurface through your attitude, through your relationships. The good news is, it's not too late to do something about it. You don't have to live with that contamination on the inside. Let it go. Forgive the person that hurt you. Forgive the parent for what they didn't give you. Let go of the disappointment, the dream that didn't work out. Let go of the guilt, the shame, the regret, the remorse. You can't keep that bottled up and reach your potential. David went to the palace to work as one of King Saul's armor bearers. Saul was proud of David, loved him like a son, but over time, Saul became jealous of David. He could see the anointing and favor on David's life. Instead of being happy for him, he wanted to get rid of him. While David was playing the harp for Saul, trying to make Saul feel better, Saul threw a spear at David and barely missed him. David had to flee for his life. He had done nothing but good for Saul. honored him, served him, but in return, Saul tried to kill him. David spent months living on the run, hiding in caves with Saul and his men chasing after him. At one point, David could have killed Saul. He snuck up on Saul and his men while they were sleeping, but he wouldn't harm him. And despite David being good to Saul, Saul never changed his mind. He wouldn't have him back in the palace. Several years later, Saul was killed in a battle. David was made the king. When David heard that Saul was gone, you would think he would be so happy, so relieved. Finally, this man that made his life miserable, caused him heartache, where he couldn't pursue his dreams, was no longer there. Surely David would call his men together, have a big party. But the scripture says David wept when he learned Saul was killed. He wrote a song honoring him, saying how beloved and how gracious was Saul. No wonder David rose so high. He learned to let things go. Can you imagine writing a song about your biggest enemy, the one that tried to keep you down, about how beloved they are? A key to David's success is he didn't let the toxins get on the inside. He didn't bury the things that weren't fair. The anger, the hurt, the injustice, he turned it over to God. Even years later, he was sitting in the palace, the greatest leader of that day, maybe of any day, having conquered all kinds of territory, seen God's favor in great ways. He said to his staff, "Is there anyone still alive from the house of Saul that I can bless?" He still had no bitterness toward Saul. He's still being good to a man that wasn't good to him. Who knows where God will take you if you'll just let things go? When you have every right to be angry, bitter, hold on to the hurt, they left you, you lost someone valuable. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's more difficult to deal with the toxins on the inside than it is to let things go. It's not always easy to forgive, but it's harder to deal with the poison of unforgiveness. It's not easy to move forward after a disappointment, but it's harder to stay stuck in defeat and mediocrity. Coach Rudy Tomjanovich was the Hall of Fame coach of the Houston Rockets and also a great professional basketball player himself. When he was 25 years old, in the middle of a game, a fight broke out between two players. Rudy ran over to break them up. One of the players turned and threw a punch without looking as hard as he could. Just so happened, Rudy was running up full speed. The punch hit him square in the face. It became known as the punch heard around the world. Fractured his skull, broke his nose and cheekbones. He had spinal fluid leaking out, almost took his life. Months later, while he was recovering, he was asked about the man that hit him and what he thought. Everyone was waiting his response. Surely he'd be angry, bitter, this is not right. Rudy didn't miss a beat. He told how he had already forgiven him, that he wasn't angry or upset. The reporters were puzzled. They said, "This man almost ended your life. He put you through all this pain. How could you possibly forgive him?" Rudy said, "I knew the only way I could move forward was to let it go. I didn't forgive just for his sake. I did it so that I could be free." Maybe you've had bad breaks. You weren't treated right, it wasn't fair. I'm not asking you to do the other person a favor. I'm asking you to do yourself a favor. Forgive so you can be free. I want to talk to you today about drop it. We all have had negative things happen to us. People did us wrong. The company laid us off. A clerk was rude to us. It's easy to go through life offended, in self-pity, blaming others, blaming ourselves, even blaming God. And because we're always looking back, reliving the negative, we end up carrying around all this baggage that weighs us down. One of the best things we can learn to do is drop it. Let it go. Whether it happened 20 years ago or 20 minutes ago, don't carry negative baggage from yesterday into today. You won't live a victorious life if you're always reliving what didn't work out, who hurt you, the mistakes you've made. The reason it's called the past is because it's over. It's done, it's history. Now do your part and let it go. Well, Joel, they betrayed me. They walked away, broke my heart. That's why I'm bitter. That's why I'm upset. Oh, they hurt you once. Don't let them continue to hurt you by always thinking about it. As long as you're dwelling on that, it's going to keep you from the new things God wants to do. God said He would give you beauty for those ashes. He said He would pay you back for that injustice, but you have to drop the hurt. Quit dwelling on it. Quit reliving it. Move forward. There is a new beginning in front of you, but God will not release new opportunities as long as we're holding on to old hurts, old failures. You may have a lot of negative things in your past. You had a rough childhood. You lost a loved one. Your business didn't make it. You could easily go around with a chip on your shoulder, not trusting anybody, bitter, resentful. But everything you've gone through has deposited something on the inside. You're not defined by your past, you're prepared by your past. You may not realize it, but you came out stronger, with more confidence, greater experience. If that hadn't have happened, you wouldn't be prepared for the new levels that are coming your way. Don't have that poor old me, look what I've been through attitude. I've heard it said, you can be pitiful or you can be powerful, but you cannot be both. You may have made a lot of mistakes. You have a lot of regrets. You blew your marriage, didn't raise your children right. But you can't do anything about yesterday. Living guilty and condemned doesn't make it any better. You have to drop it. If you'll get rid of that negative baggage, you'll not only feel that heaviness release off of you, but then you'll step in to the new things that God has in store. The scripture says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Not where the Spirit of the Lord was. If you're always thinking about yesterday, last month, last year, there's no freedom there. That's where the Spirit of the Lord was. This is a new day. There are new victories, new opportunities, new relationships. Quit living in what was and come over into what is. Right now, there is freedom for you. Right now, there are new beginnings, joy, peace, victory. And crying over what happened yesterday doesn't bring freedom. Living in regrets of what you could have been, what you should have done, doesn't do anything productive. Being offended, angry, upset over what didn't work out will only keep you in mediocrity. It's time to drop it and move forward. You may be a product of your past, but you don't have to be a prisoner of your past. Nothing that's happened to you is a surprise to God. Before He laid out the plan for your life, He already knew every person who would hurt you, every mistake you would make, every loss you would go through. And the good news is, for every setback, God has already arranged to come back. For every disappointment, a new beginning. For every failure, restoration. For all the ashes, He has beauty. You have to put your foot down and say, that's it. I may have gone through some disappointments. I may have made some mistakes, but I'm not going to waste the time I have left worried about what I could have done better, bitter over who hurt me, upset over what didn't work out. I'm stepping out of the was and I'm coming over into the is. I'm dropping the offense, dropping the guilt, dropping the failure, dropping the hurt. I'm not living my life with any more baggage. I'm gonna live my life free. Here's the key. If somebody hurts you, if you'll give it to God, He'll be your vindicator. Or if you've made mistakes, and we all have, quit beating yourself up and receive God's mercy. It's new every morning. If there are some things you don't understand, you worked hard but you didn't get the promotion, or you did your best but your marriage didn't make it, instead of carrying around that baggage, you have to be mature enough to say, God, I don't understand it, but I trust you. I'm not gonna live bitter. I'm not gonna go through life looking in my rearview mirror. I'm gonna keep moving forward knowing that my best days are still up ahead. Ecclesiastes says, better is the end than the beginning. You may have had a rough start, but you don't have to have a rough finish. Better is the end. Maybe you went through a disappointment. Somebody broke your heart. The medical report wasn't good. Don't get stuck on what happened yesterday. God is saying something better is coming. There may be some rough places in the middle, but don't stay focused on the betrayal. Better is coming. The loan didn't go through. Don't go around in self-pity. Better is coming. You prayed and believed, but the medical report wasn't good. That's one report, but God has another report. He says something better is coming. Now, don't cancel out the better by living in yesterday, reliving your hurts, your failures, the disappointments. If your mind is always in yesterday, you're going to move in that direction. You can't go forward looking backwards. If you're always thinking about who hurt you, what didn't work out, reliving your failures, calling people, telling them how bad the medical report is, you're going to get stuck. Receive this into your spirit. Better is coming. Joy is coming. Healing is coming. Breakthroughs are coming. Victory is coming. Paul said it this way in Philippians, I focus all of my energies on this one thing, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead. Here's a man who wrote almost half of the New Testament. He could have said, I focus all of my energies on being a better writer, on developing my leadership skills, on impacting the culture in a greater way. He said, in effect, what's more important than all of that is forgetting what lies behind. He knew if we went through life carrying negative baggage, we would miss our destiny. And Paul had a lot of adversities. He was falsely accused and put in prison. He was beaten with these rods, shipwrecked, gone without food and shelter, on and on. If he had not learned this principle, he would have become bitter, angry. God, why is this happening to me? It's not fair. He felt it so strongly. One translation of that verse I quoted, he said, I have not attained it all yet, but this one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind. He was saying, I'm not all I should be, but one thing I have down, one thing I'm good at, I know how to let go of the past. He was an expert at dropping it. But sometimes we spend more energy holding on to the negative than we do letting it go. What if we were to do like Paul and start focusing our energies on moving forward, dropping the offense, dropping the guilt, dropping the hurt? How do you drop it? Stop thinking about it and stop talking about it. Don't relive the negative things that have happened to you. The reason some people never see the better is because they're always opening up old wounds. Every week they call their friend, can you believe what they did to me? That happened 27 years ago. They're still dragging it up like it happened yesterday. If you're going to get free, you need to not only drop it, you need to bury it, have a funeral for it, put it away once and for all, make a decision you're not going to talk about it another time. When you're tempted to, just zip it up. That betrayal, that failure, that disappointment is dead. You buried it, you had a funeral, it's over, it's done, it's in the past. Now, if you go dig it up, it's going to stink. It's not only going to make your life sour, but nobody's going to want to be around you. When you carry around stinky stuff, you may not realize it, but that makes you unpleasant. When you're bitter, you push people away. When you're offended, angry, living guilty, it pushes opportunities away. You have to get the stink out of your life. Leave the baggage. A couple of months ago, I was coming home from a night of hope. We leave on Thursdays and come home Friday night after the event. I had forgotten to pack an extra pair of socks. So I put my socks on Thursday morning and we traveled to that city, did a book signing that night, had a lot of activity. Got up the next morning, didn't have time to go to the store, so I put my same socks back on. And that afternoon I worked out and perspired and all. That night did the 3-hour night of hope, shook hundreds of hands afterwards. When I got on the plane to come back home that Friday night, I was so tired, and I took my shoes off just so I could rest a little bit and put my head back. And about 10, 15 minutes later, Victoria came back to where I was sitting. She said, "What in the world is that smell? It stinks so bad back here." And she saw I had my shoes off. She said, "Joel, put your shoes back on. It stinks really bad." And I said, "Oh, my feet don't stink." I couldn't smell anything. I'd been back there 10 or 15 minutes, but here's my point. Sometimes when we stink, we don't know it. When we carry around bitterness, unforgiveness, guilty, angry at our neighbor, you may not realize it, but that's stinking up your life. That's pushing people and opportunities away. Why don't you get the stinky stuff out? There's an amazing future in front of you. There's beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, dancing for heaviness, but you got to move forward. Maybe you need to bury a mistake that you've made. You've lived guilty, condemned, down on yourself long enough. Have a funeral for it and put it behind you. No more talking about it. No more letting the accuser convince you that you're just a failure. You don't deserve to be blessed. You're unworthy. Those lies will stink up your life. Don't let the defeat play in your mind. When the failure, the mistake, the guilt, the disappointment comes back up on the movie screen in your mind, do yourself a favor, change the channel. Have the attitude, I'm not going backwards. I'm not living in regrets. I'm not rehearsing my failures. I'm moving forward. I may have made some mistakes, but I've got a promise, better is the end. If you'll get your mind going forward, your life will go forward. How much time and energy are you giving to the negative things of your past? Hurts, wounds, failures, disappointments. You only have so much emotional energy each day. When you're spending that energy on negative things, calling a friend, talking about how bad somebody treated you, reliving your failures, down on yourself, that's energy you should be using to move forward. You have to come out of what was and come into what is. Don't say another word about that breakup, that disappointment you went through. Don't tell another person about the mistake you made. That's over and done. You buried it, you had a funeral, now don't talk about it anymore. You can't have your mind in yesterday and expect to go forward. And the truth is, every person has baggage. We all have things that could cause us to be bitter and live with a heaviness. The difference between the people who are positive, happy, expecting good things, and people that are bitter, discouraged, negative, is that second group, they hold on to all the baggage. The first group have learned this principle to drop it, to let it go. Mark chapter 11, Jesus was talking about what we should do when somebody does us wrong. Verse 25, he said in the Amplified Version, "Forgive them and let it drop. Leave it and let it go." Notice the principle, drop it, leave it, and let it go. Maybe somebody's talking about you, trying to make you look bad. You could easily be upset, offended, try to pay them back. Why don't you try a different approach? Drop it, leave it, and let it go. God will fight your battles. Well, they betrayed me, they walked away. Don't waste another minute being bitter. Drop it, leave it, let it go. You took a step of faith, but it didn't work out. The business didn't make it. You could easily be sour. No, 3 simple things. Drop it, leave it, let it go. The reason it says leave it is because you'll be tempted to go pick it back up. You may drop it at first, and that's good, that's the right thing. But tomorrow morning, when you think about what they said, how rude they were, you'll want to pick up the hurt, pick up the bitterness. I know people that have been picking up the same offense for 47 years. It's no longer a bag, it's attached to them. It's a part of who they are. You have to leave it. It may not have been fair, but God saw what happened. He is a God of justice. He's promised that He will make your wrongs right. When you leave it, that doesn't mean that you're weak, you're giving up, You don't care what they did to you. No, you're saying, God, I trust you to be my vindicator. I trust you to open the right doors. I trust you to get me to where I'm supposed to be. Maybe at 10 o'clock in the morning, a coworker is rude to you. You drop it, leave it, and let it go. But when you see them at noon again, you're going to want to be tempted to pick it back up. Just say, no thanks, I'm leaving that offense where I dropped it. I'm not carrying any negative baggage. But so many people are just the opposite. Somebody cuts them off in traffic at 8 in the morning, at noon they're still upset. Instead of dropping it and leaving it, they keep picking it back up again and again. Put it in their bag, take it wherever they go. Friends, life is too short to carry around negative baggage. Your destiny's too important. Your time is too valuable to go through the day weighted down by offense, by guilt, by disappointments, by hurts. You have to make this decision to not only drop it, but to leave it. Don't give in to the temptation to pick it back up. There was a man in the scripture by the name of Ahithophel. He was one of King David's right-hand men. For over 25 years, he served as an advisor and close counselor to David. But when David's son Absalom made an attempt to take the throne, Ahithophel was one of the first ones to desert David and go with his son. He started advising Absalom, telling him what he should do to overthrow his father. Well, this revolt wasn't successful. Eventually, Absalom was killed. And the scripture says that Ahithophel was so distraught that he went out and hung himself. But why would a trusted advisor of King David for so many years suddenly turn on him? Ahithophel was the grandfather of a lady named Bathsheba. She was the woman that David had an affair with and had her husband Uriah killed. Then David took her as his wife. Could it be that Ahithophel turned on David so quickly because he never got over what David did to Bathsheba and to Uriah? Instead of forgiving David, dropping it, leaving it, letting it go, all those years that poisoning was simmering on the inside. On the outside, he looked fine. Everything looked like it was okay. He was advising King David, but on the inside, something wasn't right. Tragically, he ended up taking his own life. And of course, what David did was wrong. Ahithophel, in the natural at least, had a reason to be bitter, angry, upset. But when you carry around negative baggage year after year, you're not harming the other person, it's contaminating your own life. You won't have the creativity, the blessing, the favor that you should. Like Ahithophel, what they did to you may have been wrong. It may not be easy, but for your sake, not theirs, you need to drop it, leave it, let it go. When you do, God will heal your hurts. God will restore your broken places. God will pay you back for the injustice. But when you hold on to bitterness, unforgiveness, guilt, actually, you're not holding it, but it's holding you. That poison will lead you down the wrong path. Ahithophel had everything going for him, a successful career, working for the king, respected, but because he wouldn't deal with his negative baggage, he missed his destiny. It cost him his life. Don't let that be you. Don't play games with negative baggage. Bitterness, unforgiveness, guilt, drop it and let it go. Well, Joel, I don't understand why this happened to me. Why did these people do me wrong? Why did I come down with this illness? People ask me, why did your mother get healed and my mother didn't? We're never going to understand everything. Don't get caught up in the whys of life. The scripture says, we see in part now, like looking through a glass dimly, but one day we will see in full. One day it will be clear. But if you're always trying to figure out why everything happens, you're going to end up bitter, frustrated. The best thing you can do is just leave it alone. If God wants you to understand why, He's God. He'll tell you why. But if He's not revealing that to you, you need to be smart enough to let it go. Some things God doesn't want us to know. The Scripture says it is God's privilege to conceal things. If you're going to trust God, you have to accept that there are going to be unanswered questions. We have to be big enough to say, God, I don't understand why this happened, but I'm okay with not understanding why. I don't have to have all the answers. You're God and I'm not. I trust that your plans for me are for good, that you know what you're doing. Good friends of mine pastor a church in another city. One night, their teenage son was tragically killed in an automobile accident. As you can imagine, they were so heartbroken, devastated. Overnight, their world came crashing down. And they're great people, strong believers, but I didn't know how they would respond. A lot of people get bitter, angry, blame God, let it ruin the rest of their life. It wasn't easy. They went through a dark time, but they came through it. And I asked them how they did it without becoming bitter. They said, we made a decision that we weren't going to exchange what we do know for what we don't know. What we do know is God is good, that He's for us, that He's loving, that He's merciful. We weren't going to let that one situation that we didn't understand cancel all that out. Maybe you've gone through some things that don't make sense. It's bothering you, causing you to be bitter, discouraged, upset. You need to do what they did. Quit trying to figure it all out and go back to what you do know. You do know God has you in the palm of His hand. You do know God wouldn't have allowed it if somehow, some way, He wasn't going to bring good out of it. And the truth is, everything is not going to fit perfectly into our theology. We all need to have a file in our thinking called an I don't understand it file. When something comes up that doesn't make sense, you can't find an answer to, instead of getting bitter, frustrated, just put it in your I don't understand it file and keep moving forward. If you make the mistake of going through life trying to figure out why everything happened, why did I get sick, why did my loved one not make it, that's going to poison your future. 1881, James Garfield was elected the 20th President of the United States. 6 months later, he was shot in the back. The doctors were able to save his life, but they couldn't find the bullet. He was recovering just fine, but back in those days, they thought if they didn't remove the bullet, it would cause them problems later on. So they did more surgeries, probing all around, still couldn't find it. Alexander Graham Bell developed an electrical device, hoping to locate it. That wasn't successful. 2 months later, President Garfield died not from the original gunshot wound, but from the infection that came from all the probing around. Sometimes it's better to leave things alone. If you're always probing around your hurts, your wounds, your failures, because you're keeping it so stirred up, you're never going to get well. You have to turn it over to God and say, God, I don't understand it, but I'm not going to keep probing all around. God, I trust you. My life is in your hands. I'm asking you to quit looking back.